All right, so I'm recording now, and I think we're just going to go ahead and get started so we can start and end on time. The agenda is kind of the same as we've had. The coordinators are going to lead the meeting as soon as I go through the announcements and the data. I don't have any announcements, except for just to kind of remind you that the dates are every other month on the third Thursday, and our next theme will be community in February. I think you guys have already seen the data. I put the infographic in the group. We're still growing really well. We added, almost 2,500 members in the last 2 months. So we just keep going, and our engagement kind of stays steady, which is great. That just means that the people who are joining are as engaged as the people who've been here. So nice job, everyone. All right, who's up?
Okay, this is me. Tonight we're going to talk a little about diversity. That is our theme for this month. And we just want to, we know it's important. It's important not only for our jobs, but also for ed communities. But we also, as facilitators, how it affects us, our content area, as well as our ed communities. And in our jobs, a lot of times it has to do with the materials we select. Could be books, could be materials. And our content areas for ed communities, it's anything we put on there. And sometimes we look at it from a different lens. And so we're talking about diversity. And then remember, we're only on for an hour. We are not going to solve everything about diversity, but it's a start. And we think diversity is very, very important. A lot of people may not think that they have diversity in their communities, but there is diversity if you look at it. And a lot of times you're going to hear the word climate culture, diversity, what's the other one, and social justice, those kind of terms, and equity, and they all sort of merge together. And so, so I'm going to start the discussion. It says, what is diversity to you? And so remember, this is a discussion, so anyone can chime in. And so, so what do you think diversity is? And what does that term encompass for you?
I think that diversity is giving everyone an opportunity to learn the same material in regards to an education system, and respecting other people's cultures and ethnicity, and utilizing those two things to help students and educators learn or process what they need to in order to go. I think being inclusive is the most important thing in regards to being diversified in a school district in regards to an education system.
That's excellent. Other people?
This is Gabriella. Hi, Marlon.
Hi.
I think that diversity is, I agree with, I'm sorry, who was that who just spoke?
That was Shafisa.
Shafisa, I agree so much with you. And I think that what you said something about inclusion, I think that is the key to thinking of our classroom and our community as a deliberate act to not only include others, but also to create an environment where people feel that they can thrive, where students feel that they can thrive, and our colleagues, that they feel that it's a learning environment where we're not only including them, but that it's a safe place for them to engage in conversations.
I like that term, making sure we have a safe place. Other people, we want you to comment. One of the things that I think I'm probably one of the oldest people on here, and you have to remember.
No, you're not.
I am. Okay, Patrick, you can be. But 20 or 30 years ago, it was acceptable to have a taco night as diversity. And we know that is so much farther from what it really is. I mean, it might be a start for a community. When I was consulting, I would go to communities and say, well, we have no diversity whatsoever. And I said, if you really look, there is diversity. I always say, look at your programming, look at your, it could be band, it could be special ed, it could be Title I, but I said, who's in there? I mean, is it poverty students? I mean, and so a lot of times people will go to ethnic, which social justice and those kind of things, but the issue is diversity is a lot bigger. And I think Brandy's information that she provided for us by TLI gave us a huge way to look at diversity. I thought it was a great handout. Other people on what you think diversity is?
I think, this is Susie, I think diversity right now is, it's accepting other people's difference. And I think one of the biggest problems we have today is people fear difference, and what's happening, you know, in our world right now, particularly and everything else, learning, one thing is to learn from other experiences, and when it comes to diversity, well, you know, it's an L or something else, but you do have to respect them. And I think the key to learning more about, you know, sharing everything on diversity is the school climate. Positive the school climate is, the better kids to respond. And going to be more, unfortunately, you know, right now we're not a big world and very accepting differences. And I see that we've got to start as educators taking the lead in showing, being good role models. So I think it really lies in that school climate, getting a positive school climate.
And I, if not seeing the chat, really some nice also what they think diversity. And so, Brandy, can we make sure to save the resume chat too when we make sure that one of the things that I thought, if you want to turn to the next slide, Brandy. Possibly. Thank you. This is called the diversity game. I guess it's to get the people to get started, and it's just diversity game. And they just talk about, you know, what is diversity? And so these are some that, you know, it's not everything. When you look at it, those differences that we talked about, let's talk about equality, people talk about race, religion, sexual orientation, sort of gets the room going and starting what they think diversity is. We have many experts that are facilitators that work in that area all the time, but I think what we need to be looking at is we all need to be, we're not going to be perfectionists, but we all need to be aware of diversity and the materials that we pick in our classroom, as well as the posts that we post on EdCommunities. If you click, and that, these are just other terms that I came with diversity. You do one more slide, Brandy. There you go, thank you. Some other, these are just other terms that didn't come into the diversity game part, but it's just, you're trying to get people to discuss what they think that is, and that might be a good start for you if you have not done that in your professional development or ideas. So you guys have done a wonderful job of sort of talking about what diversity is, and then we're going to move on to another facilitator that's going to talk about I don't know who the next person is, you guys. There it is.
Okay.
Having some issues. Brandy, can you click on that next one? There you go.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, so Team Embolden talked about how is diversity measured and reported. And I went to my administration for help with this, just because I wanted to see how it's measured and reported within our schools first. So obviously we see diversity within our school and state report cards and our test scores. And I see it especially every day as a teacher, like our student information systems. We, of course, as schools have to submit through the state. And I think an interesting one is that students and parents are asked to fill out surveys, but sometimes, you know, they don't tell the truth all the time. So we don't really know what we're getting there. But we wanted to talk about how we think we measure and report within EdCommunities. So we can say that our posts are diverse and we're hitting a lot of people, but how can we measure that? So if anybody wants to talk about how we measure and report within EdCommunities, go ahead. Is Jason on yet? I thought he was going to talk maybe.
Jason couldn't find the link. I replied to his comment in EdCommunities.
So did I.
But I don't know if he found it or not.
Okay. One thing that Brandy brought up that I didn't even think about at our last meeting was, I don't know how many of you know, but I live in a town of 800 people. And my school district has 300 kids, pre-K through 12. And we live in the middle of Illinois. And my kids don't have internet. Like, it is hard to even get 50% of my kids to have internet outside of the school day. So we can't give assignments where some of you guys can, because they can connect to a Wi-Fi just at the end of the street, or, you know, walk to a place where that has Wi-Fi. I mean, a lot of us are 10 to 15 miles away from a town. So that's one of the things that we have to think about. So I kind of measure things like that in the classroom. But Brandy, of course, you know, brought that up, but I didn't even think about it that way. So does anybody else have anything like that? Let's see the chat. Marlon's anything in the chat?
Let me see. Let me go back up there. Okay. Measuring could include using the hashtag diversity or something similar when we post.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I experience that here because we have a large population of homeless and homeless children. And someone said, interesting idea to survey EdCommunities users and how they would describe themselves in terms of diversity.
Yeah, I like the hashtag too. That would be.
That's a great idea.
Yep. And Team Embolden, one of our goals that I'll talk about later was to, you know, post about diversity this month. And the first thing we were supposed to do was ask a question about diversity within our content area. I don't know if any of us had any success with that. I didn't, but anybody from Team Embolden?
Hi, it's Shafiza. So with us in Broward County, we actually have an equity liaison in every single school. And every single one of them, actually, all of our trainers are equity liaisons too, that work for me. So all of them, every time they post something on our Florida Evaluation and PD site, because we use it to run our professional development department, they have to think of how is this going to affect the teachers who are, you know, reading what we're posting in regards to equity. And then they have to report that back to the school district. Everything we do, every class we have to implement some sort of equity in it, or equality for all in everything we do. In fact, I just had to turn in a report to the school district, and I utilize our EdCommunity stuff, and I'll send it to you, Jillian, when I get home tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Shafiza.
No. Okay, putting you on mute again.
All right. I don't know who. Oh,
This is Patrick.
Oh, hi, Patrick.
One teacher that I know that's retired here in Mobile, we had a discussion because I'm the newly appointed NAACP education chair, so I'll be working with Mobile County Schools, which I find very interesting. But the one thing that I know there is not enough of is equity in our system. But this teacher talked about what is equal and what's equitable. And she said she talked to two students, said, I want to be fair. Said, if I was equal, you don't wear glasses, but Johnny next to you does. Now, if I was being equal to you, I would be saying that you have to wear glasses too, or I would say he can't wear glasses. Then that means that you couldn't see, he couldn't see. That's not equal. You have to be fair because this one needs glasses to see to be equal to you. I thought it was a beautiful way of expressing what equity is, and often people want to use within diversity equal when it really should be equity. And that's one of the things that I think in the classroom, outside of the classroom, or when advocating for students, is that we have to really make people understand what equity is versus what's equal.
Good point, Patrick. Okay, Brandy, I think that's all I have, so you can go on to the next slide.
Okay, that's me, Casey, and the A-team. So just a couple of general things before, I don't know, is Jonathan on? He's supposed to be speaking in a few minutes. But we were talking about why is diversity important to ed communities and our profession. And I took this exactly right from NEA, that we kind of talked about why it's important for us as teachers to be diverse, and for I like that it says students should have educators who look like them and share similar cultural experiences them, who can serve as role models for them. And we also, as educators, have a responsibility to recognize all the diversity in our classroom and plan our lessons accordingly. And one thing that's come up, I talked with a couple of people on the A-team about this, and with my colleagues at school, is with Christmas right now. That's a big thing as a third grade teacher. You know, a lot of people, I think sometimes it just overlooks you. The holidays are busy, and people are doing Elf on the Shelf in their classrooms and celebrating Christmas, and it's I know their intentions are good, but it's just so not the right thing to do, because there's kids in our classrooms that don't celebrate Christmas, that don't get gifts and do Elf on the Shelf, and it makes them feel poorly about themselves. So I actually had a conversation with like 3 teachers that do Elf on the Shelf in my own building, and this conversation about diversity and respecting other cultures, even though you think you're trying to do something good or heartfelt.
How did that discussion go?
You know, once I pointed it out to them, they were like, you know, I mean, their intentions were not bad.
Right.
But they're like, wow, I just never thought of that. So I think it actually got across to a few of them. I don't think they'll be having Elf on the Shelf next year in their classrooms and hiding the elf. So, you know, that's why it's important to our profession. We really have to be responsible to recognize all of these things. I don't know if anybody else wants to add on to that while I'm talking about that still. Okay. Okay, so moving on, it was Jonathan here because Jonathan was going to share out. He is very knowledgeable, and he's supposed to be sharing out about diversity in our profession, but I don't know that I see his name. So I guess we can move on, and if he hops on, we can kind of circle back to him. He was going to talk on behalf of the A-team about that as well.
Okay.
Hi, Hi, this is Annette. So the next few slides, and you know, as I'm talking, Brandy can kind of just scroll through them if she doesn't mind. But we were answering the question, what is diversity and how do we support the diversity of the association as a whole? And you can, I'm not going to read all these answers to you, but kind of the sort of the takeaways from it, it felt like, is that we are working really hard to improve diversity and to keep diversity at the forefront of the association. And the way to continue to do that is kind of what Casey was talking about, really encouraging people from diverse backgrounds to come into education, and so that kids can see teachers who mirror them in some way. But I think that that's sort of our big takeaway. So Brandy, you want to go through the next couple of slides? We also talked about how we could personally support diversity in our communities and our association work in our profession. And I feel like I'm repeating what Casey said too, because one of the things that is the big takeaway is you have to talk to people. You have to meet them where they are. You have to listen to them. And you have to learn from them. And if we come into the room thinking we know all the answers, that's our first mistake. So that's about it from our group, unless somebody wants to add.
What slide should it be on?
I mean, you could just, yeah, so I think I just kind of cut and pasted the comments that people in my group made. So it looks like you're through all of them at this point.
And I think one of the things about diversity is that it's an ongoing process for everybody. It's a learning, it's not something that we're going to master. It's something, I always say that it's a learning process because it's going to change. Society changes, but also I think it's something we all can learn from it, and it's all very, very important for our classroom, but also in the association. All right.
Okay, so Team Embolden is still working on our post per month and to keep our engagement percentage goal, which is 125% as an average. Our last meeting, we talked about diversity, and everyone was supposed to ask a question tool to ask about diversity in their group. We have a wide range of groups, so I don't know if anybody had any responses from that, if anybody wanted to talk about that, but that was our goal for this month. Anybody from Team Embolden want to talk about their question? Okay. So obviously our main goal is the 3 to 4 posts per week and then 125% engagement average. Our baseline data for November is there with membership posts. And we fell just a little bit short of our engagement goal. So next month we're really going to try to hit that. Go to the next slide. Ashanti had the 20 plus club this month. I think he had 39 or something. Outrageous. So great job. And we all made it through the first half of the year, I think. So I hope everybody enjoys your holiday break.
Okay, 18 is up. So we also were working on tying in diversity as it related to our groups that we specifically facilitate. And I know that Beth McKenna, are you on here? She's been doing a really good job. She runs the elementary math conversations and tying. Beth had good conversation on our team meeting about diversity and math. Beth, did you want to say a few words about that? Are you on here?
I see her. She's on. She's muted.
She was just,
I am.
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You know what you were saying about the gender roles? Could you, that was really nice.
No, I'm not sure what I said. I just,
oh,
I've forgotten what I said. In terms of math, my issue is that the diversity comes in the fact that the boys are considered math people and girls are not. And so diversity tends to be more gender oriented in math rather than in other areas. And so it has to be addressed slightly differently, I think, in the math area.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Good job. I liked that. There's our baseline data for you. And we had top 3 engagement groups in the A team were Barb Ransom, Beth McKenna, and Marlis. They have the top engagement percentages. So kudos to you, girls. Next. I was going to thank Jonathan again for sharing out, but I don't think he's still with us. Dolores, if you're on here, she had a table at the OEARA, had over 900 members attend, and she was able to talk to all of them about School to Prison Pipeline and give them materials. So good for you, Dolores. And then Annette and I, we got accepted to be presenters at the Leadership Summit in March. So we're very excited about that. And we hope that everybody has a wonderful holiday.
Hi, this one's me. So our goal is the same as everybody else's. We wanted to try to have at least one post per week that was related to diversity, equity, or cultural competence. Our baseline November data, we have just over 6,000 members. We had almost 4,500 posts and 140% engagement. I've noticed that for us, it seems like the people who have been with the group the longest don't have the engagement that some of the newer group members are having, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, but that's something that we're going to explore probably next week. So if you go to the next slide. So Joe Keys shared the following. He is in California. So he said his entire school district was affected by the Hill and Woolsey fires that burned for about a week, that I'm sure we all followed on the news, probably terrified like I was. I just felt so badly for all of these people. But about 200 families in his school district either lost their homes or have been displaced due to other damage like smoke. And he has several students who were instantly homeless, and everybody is doing their best to support these families. But it's really interesting because she's an AP teacher that teaches the same AP class as I do. She lost her house too. So it's not just the kids who are affected, it's their teachers as well. But the day before the fire started was that mass shooting that took place at that bar. So, you know, it feels like it's a small town sometimes when you have all these big tragedies that happen. And he said that even his 12-year-old daughter said, what's going to happen to me if there's a shooting at your concert, which is heartbreaking to me that we've come to this point in our society right now. But school's back in session, but it's going to take a long time for people to recover. But it reminds me of the fact that, you know, we all are talking about having a great holiday break, and we do need a break. I'm so tired, and everybody else is probably really tired too. But for some kids, that break is actually not a good thing because their home lives are not happy and they're struggling in some ways. So that's part of the diversity thing too, is we need to be aware that when the kids come back from break, like I had a girl, and you know, we live in Michigan. We haven't had any big disasters or anything, but her house just burned down. And another kid in the same class, his mom just died. So these kids are not going to have the great vacation that the rest of us are going to have. And, you know, that's something that we need to be cognizant of, I think, to be compassionate educators. So Brandy, if you want to go to the next one. So the celebrations, Amy shared that everybody that she supported became nationally board certified, which is super exciting, and that she's in her ed doctorate program, and that she is going to be presenting proposals for the Texas Association for Literacy Education and the Texas Councils of Teachers of English Language Arts, and that she did an online book study, and good news all around for Amy. You want to go to the next one? Is this me still? Then our next steps is we want to continue our goals of engagement through outreach ideas that we've talked about before and a social media presence. But we, like everyone else, wish you a safe and enjoyable and restful holiday season and a happy new year and all that goes along with that.
All right. The next slide, Curriculum Instruction Network. These are our announcements. Alyssa is back to work after her maternity leave, and her daughter is probably almost 5 months old now. Amy's, Capel's daughter, got married, and she got to go to Hawaii, which I'm sure she's all rested up from that. And then Deborah just passed, became National Board Certified, so congratulations to all three of them. And so we have three people presenting on how they infuse diversity and equity. And so we're going to start with Lisa.
All right, so I kind of just put some little snippets here in this slide. So I have two different groups, English language learners and community engagement. So within the group of English language learners, I try to make sure that I include a lot of the different populations of English language learners. So I know it's kind of small on the screen, but for the one example in my group, it's talking about, Syrian refugees. The second one talking about celebrating Hispanic scientists. And then I'm trying to look at the last one there, talking about just different world languages and how different languages are dying. Just to make sure, again, there's that variety of, all the different types of English language learners from the various, backgrounds. And then same with community engagement. So I know we talked about poverty, socioeconomic status. So one of the first links I had shared in there is the digital gap between rich and poor kids is not what we expected. So lots of variety there. So you can just kind of see just the different ones. There's one about honoring veterans. So really focusing on a lot of different groups of people within communities, not just focusing on one specific one, but just, again, making sure it is diversified within each of those groups. It's kind of what I do. So when I am looking for resources and things out there, I really look just for different ones for each of those groups.
All right, thank you, Lisa. The next we have presenting Alyssa. And if we can go to the next slide, Brandy, or Alyssa. There you go.
Hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Allie Nessler, and I facilitate the assessment literacy group. So I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment and diversity. And as everyone has talked about, when we talk about diversity, we kind of conjure up several different conceptions of what that means. And some of us think about equity of our system. Some of us think about diverse student populations. Some of us think about making our classrooms more inclusive. And some of us think about all those things. So assessment literacy, or quality assessment practice, as I call it, oftentimes is wholly connected to culturally responsive teaching practices, which is how we respond effectively to diverse student populations. And as our student populations continue to become more diversified, it becomes increasingly more important for us to become assessment literate educators. And so that is going to be kind of what I am talking to you about in the next few slides, and how I infuse resources into the assessment literacy ed community. So we can kind of go on to the next slide. So I won't read you that definition. I'll let you go ahead and read that. But the National Task Force on assessment education for teachers basically defines assessment literacy as just that, being able to respond effectively to diverse student populations and acting assertively based on those values. So just as a little background on my group moving forward, that's what I try and promote discussion about. You can go on to the next slide. Assessment is really connected to diversity and equity and culturally responsiveness because of its connection to motivation for both teachers and students. So educators can be really motivated by assessment because they see the great gains in learning and growth in their students. And that's what assessment can do in the hands of assessment literate educators. It promotes learning and growth. And then for our student, and then assessment literate educators oftentimes understand that it's so important for students to have equity of motivation, meaning that all students believe that they can attain academic success if they strive for it. And one of the great things is about our group is when we're sharing about formative assessment, that's how students are able to tangibly see their academic success is through high leverage formative assessment practices like diagnostic assessment and feedback and self-assessment and goal setting. And so that is a large amount of resource that I provide is on those high quality formative assessment practices for classroom teachers and specialists. Go on to the next slide. So teachers hear a lot about different practices that are going to meet the diverse needs of their student population. So quality assessment practices, culturally responsive practices, trauma-informed practices, and all teachers want to meet all of their students' needs, but it can feel really overwhelming. And it can feel like all of these different practices might be different things and that we need to learn about, or different things that are added to our plate. And so one of the things that I really try and do on my ed community is show how quality assessment practice or assessment literacy show how it's connected to culturally responsive practice and trauma-informed practice. And so, for instance, Zaretta Hammond, the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, defines culturally responsive teaching as educators being able to respond to their students with an array of teaching moves and incorporate students' culture in their education. And I see quality assessment practices being those teaching moves that we use to respond to students. So I really see assessment literacy as how we operationalize equity and cultural responsiveness into our classrooms on a day-to-day basis. And so I try and infuse that throughout all of my posts. Can go on to the next one. And so how we operationalize equity, how we operationalize culturally responsive teaching, and make sure that our assessment system is balanced and inclusive for all students is by focusing on these 5 keys to quality assessment. So clear purpose, clear targets, sound design of assessment, effective communication of assessment results, and then student involvement especially. And so this is really the meat of what I'm sharing, and I am trying to create dialogue about and hopefully asking questions to and tagging other groups where it's relevant, so that we can share our ideas about this and kind of just get more information out there about how a quality assessment practice can further help us to respond to our diverse student populations.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. That's great information. Kimberly, and she does our gifted and talented, and she had the slides, Brandy, that you were going to put up. There we go. No, Kimberly was on there. Kimberly, are you still there? You might be muted.
Yes, I apologize.
There we go. There we go.
The best part of my day. All right, so my NEA Ed community is gifted and talented in the 21st century. So I was kind of looking at why is diversity important, particularly with my ed community. And I'll be honest, I love it because as a sociologist, I've noticed that many of our posts, if you look at the news, kind of like Google, academically gifted or gifted and talented, you're 9 times out of 10 going to pull up content that deals with diversity. So it makes it a little bit easier with this community. I always call it like 24/7 diversity. A lot of things that I'm pulling up as sources. And we're looking at diversity and inclusivity. And I always think about that pink elephant. These are the topics, of course, that we don't really talk about much. Particularly in the gifted population, it still remains one of the most segregated sectors within schools. And as we talked about earlier, it being white, male dominated. There are some things I last Saturday was at a FBLA competition for middle and high school students and was excited to see that it was female dominated when it came to the winners on stage, but that is a shift away from what we see as the norm. So really pulling resources that deal with that pretty much comes easy. So next slide. What diversity looks like in the community. I really thought about two areas of diversity, and the first being diversity of gifted populations beyond math and reading. Really trying to focus on pulling resources, whether or not it's news articles or data, research that deals with what gifted populations look like beyond math and reading. Really looking at the arts, really quite honestly looking at other content areas that we really don't focus on as much in gifted, just because, for example, in North Carolina, most of our servicing is just for math and reading, but we know that we have diverse, again, gifts beyond those areas. Definitely the 21st century, so pushing on that as well. But I also look at diversity of populations represented within the gift realm. So that gets into more of what we've been talking about tonight, always with the conversation of looking at ethnicity, looking at racial issues when it comes to gifted population. All right, next slide. Some of the diversity topics that I've found trending, I guess, in the gifted and talented, underachievement among gifted learners. And this is a big topic when we think about all the kids that we see in any given classroom. Underachievement is a big issue, and a lot of it is how do we expose the needs of our kids, particularly when we look at our social and emotional needs being a factor to underachievement. So pulling content so that people know how to identify kids in the gifted realm when it comes to underachievement, and what are the base needs that they have, what are the reasons behind the underachievement. Some other topics that I pulled are, again, the young ladies in STEM. I've had some articles recently about the increase, thankfully, when our young ladies in STEM. I've also looked at minority identification for gifted population. This being one of the biggest weaknesses, how do we identify our minority students, particularly when they might be falling below the norm thresholds when it comes to our that we're using for identification, or any other factors that districts might be using in general. Making sure that they are inclusive and allow for kids that might not meet that mark when it comes to testing mark. How else are we going to identify giftedness? And also been pulling a lot about socioeconomic barriers to identification, and necessary enrichment for all learners. And something that I'm getting ready to move into. My role is a little bit different now as a lead teacher, and I love it because I'm able to, I have about 90 students in my own building that are identified, and we have created every block at the beginning of the day. Throughout the whole building is 40 minutes remediation. That's my time that I identify, that I service my students. They're actually triple service. And I'm able to use that, and I say all that because I'm able to use it as kind of a lab setting. And a lot of that, what we're doing, we're going to start blogging because we're looking at different approaches to reaching gifted learners. And a lot of that is meeting diverse needs. We're really focusing in on how do we identify those students that are underrepresented and how do we meet those social and emotional needs that they have. So it's been very awesome about that. So that's where I'm moving towards, making sure that I use what is pretty much live data and happening each day in my building that really aligns with what we see as far as our research. So it's like research in motion. So I'll be pulling some of that in the near future. And that is where we are with Gifted and Talented. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. And Brandy, when you go back to the PowerPoint, the next 3 slides are just our a la carte menu. Diversity is in on 2 of the pages. That is just part of what we already do. And then we have our data. If you go to the 3rd slide of the data, is really an overview. 2 more slides, Brandy. This is our overview. The engagement's about 124%. Our members are about 7,500. And so that's just sort of our breakdown of our data for the month of November. That is curriculum instruction. And I know our next meeting is February 21st at the same time. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Your mother is calling. Your mother is calling. Can you hear me, Marlon?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Yeah, this is Susie. I just tried to, I was having trouble muting problems. Anyway, in my, both my groups this month, I featured diversity. And if anybody's interested, there's great resources for teachers in there on teaching equity and diversity in the bullying group, and also in the LGBT group, talking about diverse issues with that population, and also on bias-based bullying and how basically how diversity is affected by that, and also information on immigrants and diversity.
Anyone else have any comments or announcements or anything?
Yes, this is Patrick. One thing I want to ask the group, if you go back to your states, we're having the conferences coming up in March, and I'm part of a team with the retired that's out to help engage and increase membership in the retired, but also in the regular also. So I'm supposed to have a table there to work with Linda Will Smith, who is on the retired council. So if you know anyone that's getting ready to retire, reach out to us, because I think this is one way we can also engage them to help out with, because when I sign, I'm at the table, I'm going to ask people to check out our group here, because I think the more engagement we have in education, the better it will be all for all of us. So if y'all can help out, I'd really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have anything to share before we sign off?
Hello. I did have something to share. One of the things I like about this whole group and being a facilitator is it adds to our educator's voice. One of the things I wanted to ask, I'm going to have to talk to Brandy later, but I would definitely like any input on educator's voice, because I see this whole tool, this whole platform used to create and amplify our voice. Is because there's so many different avenues and so many different topics and resources on EdCommunities. And I just wanted to thank everybody for providing stimulus. It's because I read a lot of the articles and things you put on, and I just appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
This is Mary Ellen, and reporting from Wisconsin, a very happy Wisconsin. My state superintendent boss is now our governor-elect.
Yes.
And I don't know if you all have been keeping up on what's going on, but we've had like an state to a lame duck stuff going on. But I got a really cool tweet today talking about how he is rejuvenating science as being an entity again and a focus again in education and at all levels. So that's good. He's also tapping on his Teachers of the Year for voice and ideas on budget, on programming. So he's been out and about already and tapping on us. It's really exciting. So anyhow, I just had to share that good news. Walker's gone. So yay! And we had a big turnover. So that's why the lame duck was going on, so that they could squelch things that would be happening. So anyhow, that's what I got.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that.
And I'm going to the ball. So we're all invited. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he's also having a gala. So we'll be working on volunteering for that as well. So exciting stuff.
All right. Would anyone else like to share? All right. If not, we hope everyone has a great break. We all know we all deserve it. And whatever holiday that you do celebrate, we want you to have a great one, a safe one. And thank you very much. It was great information. Thanks for everyone that shared. Everyone that shared brought a lot of information. And Randy's going to keep the chat because there's a lot of good information on diversity in there also. So thank you so much, and we'll see you February 21st is our next large group facilitators meeting.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.